we are back. Apologies for the very long break between the last episode and this. I don't think we need the excuses. It's been almost a week. It's been 6 days. I just been busy with school kicking off again and other stuff. I'm gonna try to have my school done in such a way that I can at least continue having streams, but the streams might be later on in the day and they may also be shorter in length. I don't know how long this first section is going to take. It depends. This could be the whole stream. It could potentially only be a few hours or like 2 hours, then going straight into episode 6. I'm not going to give any 100% confirmation guarantees or anything about what exactly will entail, but I wanted to do a little bit of a... I don't know if I would call it a theory stream or if I would call it a recap or a discussion. Let me get the game open for everybody here. I don't know why my... Sorry, I gotta delete some shit off my computer real quick. I'm tired of it telling me that I'm low on storage space when I'm not. And I don't know why my Steam thinks it's time to update games. We're not updating games, pal. Right now, we are streaming. Okay, Umineko project. Opening it up. You will see it momentarily. There it is. So, let's go to the music box, because we're actually gonna repeat what we did the last time, but I think I want to have a song that's a little bit more lax than what we had the last time. There's got to be like... This sounds okay. This is nice, but it's also a little bit over the top. Nope. This is like the opening song for the game. We'll rock with this, okay? I'm gonna turn down the game audio a little bit because we're gonna be talking for a while here, similar to the theory stream again. Like I said, I don't know how long this is gonna be necessarily. So, I'm gonna open up some notes. I went through and reread some of the scenes to make sure that I fully understood what was happening, just because that was a very long stream. For episode 2 was like 12 hours. So I want to make sure that I fully grasped everything. I think I did. When I went through, there wasn't really a whole lot of new shit that I added. I just, I made it sure, Jesus, see, brain mush. I made sure that everything was kind of together. I'm going to open these up in such a way that we did on the theory stream. One moment, I know you can't see anything. I'm just getting everything set up. So there's two big questions, or big questions in general, that I want to ask, and we're going to try to provide some explanation as we go along. So let me close all this. Let me close this. Let me drag this down. Let me drag this down. And let me finally show you guys. So, that's what we're working with. Very similar to the prior times. Let me close Firefox as well. I don't need this open. So, these are the notes that I took when I was off, and there was like 4... So there was a few sections that I covered. So one, this was just like some very big meta things. Some of this will be repeated because we're going to, it'll be theory stuff. But so let's just read through the notes that we're all on the same page. This was after I did my reread, just to make sure that, we know what's going on, right? Prior to the conference stuff, Ava places the receipt on the door prior to the meeting to discuss what happens with the gold. So this is, I should say, when I say on the door, to the study. Prior to the meeting to discuss what happens with the gold. At some point, Ava gives Erika her tip about sealing doors. We'll come back to this later. I believe I put it somewhere. Potential that they're working together. We know Ava seals Genji's doors, yet the duct tape that was used had Erika's signature. They were definitely working together after the meeting, potentially prior, not just a sharing of tricks. So just to say that we know there's some collusion that was going on between them. They were sharing tricks, because this isn't like, oh, they were giving each other like one tip or another. I mean, she's literally using the seal that has Erika's name on it. So this is getting back more to stuff with the epitaph. This first section is going to be kind of all over the place because it's not really focused on a particular scene. It was stuff that was prior to the conference that I thought was important. So the child has nothing to gain from the solving of the epitaph. Whether the epitaph's riddle is solved or not, she has nothing to gain from it. Now, so the next message below kind of addresses this. We reasoned during the stream that it means killing themselves are the message, or at least equal to. That meaning that there is a message that is being conveyed through the killings, and the ritual, meaning the epitaph, and the killings are greater than the whole. I don't know if I put that somewhere here. I think I said it during the stream, but it's like the sum of the whole, or sorry, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. So we know that maybe in isolation the epitaph is meaningless. Maybe in isolation the murders are meaningless. But when combined together, they have a greater meaning than they both would have by themselves. They convey something that is not otherwise conveyed. So, now that we continue, she either wants the killings to tell some kind of message or to have the ritual halted and her gold passed off entirely. Of notice to remember the addition by subtraction discussion that losing the gold to her is maybe a good thing. So we touched on this a little bit, that maybe, I'll get into this more because I didn't posit this during the stream. This is something that I was thinking about while I was playing it, which is literally in the next line, so don't read ahead, no content cucking. That basically, we know that Beatrice has the gold, right? And we questioned during the stream what the game meant when it said gain, because gain is a very, again, we know the witches like to play with words. It's a very interesting way depending on how you want to talk about the word gain. There's a lot of different ways that that could mean something. So when we talk about gain, does it mean like fiscally? Does it mean in any other fashion? But what does gain necessarily mean? Does it mean an improvement in like some value? So for instance, like emotional well-being, financial well-being, or could it be something more esoteric? What I mean by this is that, for instance, the emotional well-being of something is pretty hard to quantify. So the question is, when it says gain, does it only mean monetary? If it's talking about on an emotional level, you can lose things. For instance, let's say a toxic relationship, and you can improve, but technically you lost something. This is what I was talking about when I meant addition by subtraction, that perhaps the gold... I'll read the next point and I'll comment. We already know that Ava spoke of the gold like a curse. This was in the post-episode 3. Maybe there is some supernatural side/curse to it, at least to the degree that Beatrice believes in it, not just the real world side of it, that it causes you paranoia, stress, etc., all the shit Ava talked about in episode 3 Tea Party plus the question marks. Maybe Beatrice wants the gold off her hands or destroyed, leads into what does the red statement mean by gain. So now to circle back to the point I was just making, there is a question of whether or not the gold is something that Beatrice even wants. So I was talking with a friend last night, shout out Alan, and we were talking about this. He hasn't played the game either, he's only been following the streams, and he's almost caught up, so he's mostly to where we are. And when I was talking to him about it, we were saying that one of the things that's interesting about the theory is that, or about this theory with the gold, is that the problem is, so we're going to run into like a thing, I'm going to try not to loop on it too long once we hit it, but there's a lot of things right now that we currently don't really have like a super clean explanation for. Like it feels like it doesn't fit very well. It's like it fits like 40% of the way, but then like, or even like 70 or 80% of the way, but like the last 20% it like really, really doesn't fit, or it's just imperceptible right now. The thing with the gold is if we think the gold might have some negative association with it. All we've been talking about the whole game is about how gold is good, gold is good. Now, the only thing that's a little bit suspect about all that is that Beatrice seems to be very willing, if not eager, to lose her gold. We know that Ava talks in the post-episode 3 Tea Party or question mark, I don't remember which one it was, I think it was the Tea Party, about how the gold ruined her life afterwards. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, she was paranoid, she had all these fears about people coming out to get her, how she could never like build any relationship or get close to anyone because the gold was something that isolated her. Now, the interesting counter side of this would be, let's view it from Beatrice's perspective. What would she care about with the gold? So if we think that this is something that is actually a characteristic of the gold, whether it is a literal curse or just an interpreted one, if we think that, you know, whatever it might be, we could say that, like, maybe the ritual killings and the murders, they both serve one purpose, which is to end the gold. What I mean by that is that you have, like, episode 3 where Ava wins, and whoever Beatrice is, the gold, which has been cursing her, is passed off, and she's been given freedom. right? She's freed from the gold. Everything about Beatrice's character, like, the constant theme throughout this story of Beatrice is being caged in some way. You had her being caged at Kuadorian, you have her now being caged in the game with Lambda Delta, and it could possibly be even on a third level that she's also being caged by whatever, like, the curse or the true nature of her gold is. So you have two possibilities for how the gold could be given off of her hands. One, you urge people to solve the epitaph, right? And by urging people to solve the epitaph, you eventually, by urging people to solve the epitaph, you necessitate, or hopefully you push somebody to find the gold such that you can pass it off. Now, we also then need to get into the contradiction that Battler mentions in episode 4 and 5, which is, it seems if that was the case, it's a little bit odd that she would be so willing and able and ready to start killing people, because you are necessarily working against that goal. But this is where the second part comes in, where the other way that she could get rid of the gold is the, like, mass death scenario, where the Ushirimiya gold, right, can only be passed on. This is the other thing too that will be important. We don't know the terms of the contract. I'm sure we'll find out at some point, but we don't know the terms of the contract that Beatrice drew up with Kenzo. So because of that, because we don't know the terms of how that contract was written up, we don't know what stipulations are required from both sides in it. And the interesting thing about that is that Beatrice might have to, like, pass the gold on to the Ushirimiyas, right? Like, this is like an inheritance, as you know, it's passed through the family. Generally, you don't give your inheritance to people that are outside your family, you know, maybe rare circumstances. But what I mean by this more so, I guess to circle back to the point, is that the only other way that she could make it such that she wipes the gold off her hands if nobody can solve the epitaph is she just kills everybody, potentially including herself, because that's the only other way that you can get freedom, you know? Not to quote Monster again, although this isn't a Monster quote, it's just a line from it, not like they came up with it, but that, like, the great equalizer being death, right? That to equalize out all the suffering that she has, the only way that she can end this cycle is to wipe out everybody. Now, the only thing together is that I don't put it this way, I don't think that's entirely correct. There might be some nugget of truth in what we're saying about the gold being cursed. I don't think the overarching thing there is correct, and we'll get to why I think that later, but it has to do with the epitaph at its core. Because to me, it seems like the epitaph is, like, the solution, you know? If you can find the solution to the epitaph, it's over, right? Everything becomes clear. The one thing that I was thinking about as well while doing this is that if we talk about episode 3, right? I've viewed episode 3 as sort of a hijacking of the game, but it might not be that same way, and the reason why I say it might not be that same way is if we find whatever the Golden Lands thing is, right? Whatever the true epitaph key selection meme is. If episode 3 follows that, it starts to make you wonder a lot more about how much Beatrice still had an influence on episode 3, because it might have been like she, and this was sort of how it was posed during the episode, that it was like a willing hijacking, you know? I joked about it being like a Death Note plan, where she's like giving up her Death Note, aka her magic power, but it's actually all part of some big greater plan for her to come back. It's like, okay, we get that part. But let's continue. It seems like completing the epitaph and completing the ritual are inversely proportional. She urges us to complete the epitaph, yet kills us, which leads us to holding up and not solving it. Maybe there are two motives here / not the same person doing both. Again, not entirely sure about that, but that's just the paradoxical nature of what's going on, which is why I think, you know, it's like the third variable problem, right? We're looking at two variables and we're trying to see how they influence each other, or, you know, the way that these change in response to outside stimulus. And we think that maybe like A influences B or B influences A, but in reality we have a third variable C, which is actually the real controlling thing, and we're just unknowingly modifying C. And I think that might be, doesn't apply map one-to-one in this concept, but there's a weird paradox between the epitaph and the ritual, right? There's some weird inverse proportionality where the ritual, whenever the ritual is guaranteed to succeed, completing the epitaph is impossible. And whenever the epitaph is guaranteed to succeed, completing the ritual is impossible. So it almost seems like there has to be some benefit in both, right? Like there has to be some message that is obtained through both of them, through the killings and whatnot. And I don't know if I write this later, but there's something that's very weird. Okay, it's below this, so we'll continue. Battler, you are not the culprit. You haven't killed anyone. Sorry, I ramble a lot, so I'm trying to make sure that I can... This is why I wrote this, because I don't want this to be like a 6-hour theory stream like we had before. That was fun, and I enjoyed it, And there's going to be some theorizing that we'll do here, but I don't want to get too bogged down, because I do want to continue. Like I said, I've been stalling for a while. You are not the culprit. You haven't killed anyone. That can be said of all games. It's weird that Virgilia can still make red statements about the game board, even though Beatrice is no longer the game master. We get told almost explicitly later on that it is only the game master's discretion, or at least as far as I recall. I will say, that was one of the only parts I did not see when I was reading through. It seemed kind of weird, although we could say that, see, it's, I don't know. I'm going to put it, don't take that one at face value 100%. I might not be correct on that, but, I know she's supposed to be speaking for Beatrice, but Beatrice still isn't the game master, but I guess you could say it's still her game board, so she can, and Virgilia is just speaking for her. Whatever. Don't worry about that point. Her goal isn't revenge or fear or pleasure, it's to send a message to Battler, to find the message in the meaningless deaths, hence why he is left alive every time. The sum of the ritual in the epitaph is greater than 0, where any integer above 0 indicates some meaning. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, so this is basically what we were just talking about. And a lot of that is going to have to do with info that we haven't necessarily divined yet. We'll get back to that later about the current working theories. So now we're going to get on to the dinner conference, the noise, and the knock, okay? The Nazi has keys to both the study, has both keys to the study. The conference was being recorded on a tape player. Rudolph was the one that was handling the tape. Rosa mentioned cold medicine and feeling feverish. She never left the room, though. The knock is described as reserved, so it's not like a bang, bang, bang. It's like a very, ding, ding. Shannon and Cannon reacted in a surprised fashion. To be fair, everybody did, but I think the big reason why is that they knew it wasn't a knock that they recognized, which is why they mentioned it like that. The knock repeated one more time in the same manner. It happened right before the clock struck midnight. I think this is going to be somewhat important. If there was a mechanism or a trick of some kind that was set up, I think it might have been rigged to that. The only thing again would become how the character who set it up, how they fashioned it in such a sense that it would activate at the perfect time when everybody was in there, and this was the point that gets brought up later, which I won't get into a little bit more, or I won't get into too much because it's theory stuff, and I'll try, but it's pretty hard to understand. But I think it was Delana or somebody in that last episode mentioned that it's not so much that the knock is important or that the letter themselves are important, but it's the combination of the two that's important. It's kind of relevant if we want to talk about the killings and the ritual, that the letter by itself has some meaning, right? The ritual by itself, the knock by itself is a mystery. They're both mysteries, but both of those mysteries, the knock only has any value because the letter happened to be placed at the door. If it was just a random knock somewhere in the mansion, you could provide any number of explanation as to why, that didn't apply, whether it was just something fell or, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of different things that you could have put forward. The letter contained the head's ring. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if there's always a letter handed out in some fashion that contains the head ring. I don't remember how or if Ava came into possession in episode 3. Given that she got the gold, I imagine she must have at some point. There was no clue for episode 1 either, as far as I'm aware. It makes me wonder if Rosa maybe had an episode 2 from the letter she was given from Beatrice. So the only reason why I say that is that there seems to be a question mark about that letter, and this is the only other letter we've seen that was addressed specifically to a person, and Rosa lives until the very fucking end. She even gets gold at the end of it. She steals a gold bar, I think, from the chapel at the very end of episode 2. And she's fighting off the demons and shit, right? But there's something. I wrote down what it said. The letter said, "Congratulations, I acknowledge that Battler has spectacularly solved the riddle of the epitaph and reached the Golden Land. The gold belongs to him in its entirety. Furthermore, he is also the new head of the Ushirmiya family. As proof, I send the head's ring, which Kinzo left in my charge." Which means, and this is something interesting as well to point out, at the start of the game, in episode 1, we were given this vision of Kinzo, the storm starting and him throwing the ring outside of the window and, returning it back to Beatrice. That's all well and good, but in reality, if we want to divine the real meaning of it, it's that whoever Beatrice is was already in possession of the ring at the start of the game, right? Given that we know that Kinzo was dead, there's no way that he was throwing it out of his window and whatnot. So, that's something to be said. She probably already had it to begin with, but it means that she was also the one that was giving it out to people. And the reason why I mentioned Rosa in episode 2 is the fact that we had that. There was nothing that was ever given and no way for us to know what it was, right? Ava, we presume, gets it at some point. We know that Battler got it in this episode. So, yeah, there's something that's going on. The other thing that's very interesting about that, I think that I mention it here. So I said, Whoever it is that sent the letter is obviously aware of the gold being found. Now, you might say, well, duh, no shit, they all walked down to it. But the interesting thing about this, right? It's not that they know that the gold was found. Of course, they would know that if they went there. But the better question is, how would this person know who it was that found it and have a letter drafted that they could have, because, you know, they basically found the gold and walked right back. How did this person have a letter drafted that was ready? Now, you could say that maybe these are like fully printed letters with like a blank for a name and you just like write the name in. Sure, maybe. But there's something interesting that they have to have some way to be aware that the gold is found, even if we look at episode 3, right? Because in episode 3, there was only 2 people that found it. We'll come back to that later, but there was only 2 people that we were aware that have found the gold. And to this point, throughout the rest of the game, we don't believe that anybody else has found the gold. I was talking with Alan about this, that there's a little bit of like a discrepancy, or like, and maybe this is like a difference in understanding or like a knowledge check or something, but I don't think that the gold was found in the first 2 episodes. One, not because the game, like, sorry, the hiccups. It's hard to take the game at its word, but I don't see any reason why it would be like lying for the first 2 episodes that the gold was found and not tell us. When I say not found, I mean, like, obviously Beatrice knows where it is, but that anybody who's not Beatrice has found it. But in episode 3 and 5, we get confirmation of people finding it, and it's made very aware that they have found it, right? And like we said earlier, Beatrice doesn't seem to have anything. If anything, she's urging people to find her gold, right? And I said, of note, is saying that Kinzo left it in this person's care, so, which we know, this is basically referencing what I said before, that the ring was handed off to the person at some point before the start of the game. Whoever it is must have, oops, I don't want to do that. Whoever it is must have some way of telling if and when the gold is found. Of note, I mentioned this here, maybe they have like a CCTV feed of like that room down there so they know, right? Something like that. Because there has to be some way that they are able to monitor the gold, that they're able to tell. 1, Genji was shocked by Battler being in possession of the ring. Now, we could say that this was because none of the servants were brought down to find the gold, so, you know. Confirmation, this is for stuff later. Confirmation that Rosa did not leave until 1 a.m. to go check, at least according to the game. She returned to the guest house around 1 a.m., so slightly after, because I'm assuming it's not that long between the mansion and the guest house, went straight upstairs to sleep. Battler mentioned when he walked up in the room there was a night light which was on in the room, yet he still didn't notice anything. Again, you could say it was a very dim light, so like, maybe, sure, but... And this here is just going over a lot of these now are more like fact of the matter. We'll get more into the... But this was just writing down like facts and stuff to understand, and technically they probably exist in my notes here on the left as well, but I just wanted to make sure that I fully understood everything. So Lambda later confirms that no one in the mansion placed the letter or knocked via any indirect, direct, intentional, unintentional, coincidental manner in both cases. So in both cases, the letter or knocked, nobody in the mansion did it. So we can basically wipe out everybody that was inside. Now we're gonna get into some fuck shit around this, where we're saying in the mansion, right? In the mansion at what time, right? In the mansion at the time that we're talking about the knock? Okay, sure. So we can exclude a whole bunch of people, but regardless. Cornelia notes that at 2400 midnight, no other humans than those in the corridor, Kraus, Natsui, Genji, and those in the conference room existed inside the mansion. Of note, remembers the knock and the letter came before 2400, even if very briefly. It seems like it's weird because they kind of play a little bit of like a fast and loose with when it happened, because when we're playing through the chapter, the knock happens before that. So then the question becomes, Delana mentions that anyone who was in the mansion, those discovered or undiscovered, could not be responsible for the knocking sound. No, did not mention the letter, right? She only said this for the knocking sound. We could have a double... I've said this before, Beatrice has accomplices. We're going to get back to this later. And I don't just mean Maria, but like there has to be some amount of like, whether it's through blackmail, whether it's through coercion, whether it's through them actually believing in a shared goal, right? Erika posits it had to be someone in the guest house group, and they timed the knock with the letter in some fashion, albeit the timing is the hardest part, so this is what I was talking about earlier. At midnight, only Erika, George, Jessica, Maria, Nanjo, Goda, and Kumasawa existed outside of the mansion. No one outside the mansion could influence anything inside the mansion after the start of the family conference. Now, this is again where we're going to get into weird slimy word games about could influence anything inside the mansion after the start of the family conference. Okay, sure, but they could influence things before the start of the family conference that would then affect the family conference, right? And then they wouldn't have to have been there. No one in the mansion would misidentify a knocking sound. A knock in this case means... So I misinterpreted this when we were playing, that I was saying, oh, somebody could have knocked on another door. My understanding from Lambda's exact verbiage is that when she means a knock, she literally meant a knock on that door. The door to the dining hall was knocked on, and it must be done with a hand. So again, interesting. Erika posits that some trick was used in blue, yet it's denied if she can't give a specific way the trick was done. So there is a trick of some kind that's being done. Personally, I have a theory, okay? And we'll come back to it, and I don't know how it makes sense, but I have a theory. And I think it all makes sense, because there's a very tricky word game here that I literally have just realized now, and I don't know if it'll work. But I think actually I'm smoking crack. The more I think about it, I think it's wrong. We'll go to the study scene. Study scene, the way Rika commends Battler when he catches Erika on a literacy knowledge thing seems to indicate she isn't controlling him, or at the very least, if she is, she's surprised by the knowledge that he has. We'll come back to this too. Kumasawa said, let's leave fate in God's hands. An odd comment to make. I don't know if we've ever had a mention of God at all in any point of the story so far. Maybe I'm just misremembering, but I feel like they don't mention God very much. It's always Beatrice, Beatrice, Beatrice. Interesting to just bring up God when we're talking about how, like, Delana and all these people are, like, soldiers of heaven and whatnot. Burncastle and Lambda still seem to consider Beatrice of the board as representative of Beatrice at this point. Ava, now this could be total deceit, so not. Ava shows the receipt proving no movement in the study after 11 p.m. Delana rejects hidden doors. Note, she says in this room. So I made a note of this, that the game might follow Nox's rules, and I don't think there's going to be an insane magical influence. I did mention this to Alan, that I think there's like a 95% that this is entirely physical, but I'm waiting for the 5% like magic curveball that gets thrown in at some point, like what happened at the end of Higurashi. So I'm a little bit, questioning there. Nox's third is defined differently in this than it is in the real world Nox. So the real world Nox third is that no more than once in secret room or passage is allowable. It's a trick you can use once. Note as well, she says hidden door in the last statement and passage in this one, right? So when she gives the full thing, she rejected hidden doors in the study, but when she references Nox's third, I should have wrote the whole statement. It's probably somewhere up in my actual notes. She mentions passage, okay? There's a big difference between a passage and a door. Okay, a door might link to a passage, but it doesn't necessarily have to, right? A hidden door could be like the Saddam Hussein like a hiding place, Like you could have like a hidden trap door that goes to just a hidden hiding place, right? And so this scene here is sort of a great example of how red statements can be truth statements, but not represent literal truth. What I mean by this is they can be statements that are true, but they don't necessarily apply to the situation that we're talking about, or they sort of dance around the point. I have a little bit more respect for the study scene because I think it I think it's a good, it's just showing like a good mix of how the red and the blue are used, and exactly if you had like doubts about the red and the blue and like how they could be bastardized and like misused prior, that scene is kind of a good example of how. And then there's also the talking point, which I didn't mention here, the fact that Cornelia doesn't use the thing that would disprove Kenzo's existence. We get to a talking point about the fact that Rika and Lambda, for some reason, are perpetrating a lie in the game board that they know is fake and that we know is fake. But there has to be some utility in them doing it. Now, in this game, you could argue that it was done to put pressure on Natsuhi, right? Who knows? But regardless, here, I just wanted to put down like which ones were invoked. So we had the first, the second, the third, the fourth. The fifth isn't because it's totally not. But so basically every single Nox commandment is invoked by Nox in the study scene, except for the fifth, which is omitted from the game because it's basically just racist shit. But every single other one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 skipped, 6, 7, 8, 9 is all 9, 10 is all included. I just wanted to make sure to see, because if she's stating in red certain statements, some of these might only apply to certain situations. So when she says in this room when we were talking about this, a lot of these things are much more broad statements, like, oh, the detective can't be the culprit, things like this. But regardless. The Golden Land meeting, I think this is another really important scene. She says, Battler states explicitly that Beatrice of the game board is a fiction of Lambda Delta. Now this is sort of true in the sense that we're going to get into a question, which I guess I'll address now, is we don't know, how do I word this? So there's going to be a question that I'll bring up a little bit here in a minute when we're talking about theorizing about Beatrice and like the identity of Beatrice and knowing what if the Beatrice of the board and the Beatrice of the Witch World and the Beatrice of the Golden Land are all the same one, or if there is like a bastardization, if there is like a fake, thing that is going on, these things are not 100% clear. We'll get into that later. I don't want to, but just remember and to note that Battler in the Golden Land states explicitly that the Beatrice of the game board is a fiction of Lambda Delta, which we could argue is true. We'll come back to this. Interpretations may alter the process, but not alter the result or fact of the matter. Delano says it complies with the ninth, meaning that when we were talking about the Virgilia tea set scene, the tea still exists, the tea still tastes the way it is, the tea is still the temperature that it is. It doesn't really matter if you know exactly how the tea was brewed. If you want to say and embellish it and say, oh, you made it magically, okay, sure. It doesn't really matter because the fact of the matter is what it is. Delano is an enemy of evil, not of magic. She sees no reason to attack magic, which hides a process. Virgilia calls magic an embellishment, not a lie. It's a flourish on the truth, intended to make things better than they would otherwise be. The example of this given, like Maria Halloween candy being produced after it was ruined in episode 2 versus hidden in her pocket and then said that a witch put it there when she wasn't looking, right? We all know the reality of this. You could think about this like Santa Claus in a weird way, right? The difference of saying like, oh, you didn't get any presents this year, or like Santa's actually mom and dad, here you go, and producing the presents right in front of the kid, versus having like this little magic and this whimsy of saying, oh no, there actually was a guy who like snuck in the house that you didn't see and he placed the presents under the tree and look, they're from Santa, they're not from us. And it's like, sorry, taking a drink. That's, I think Santa Claus, weirdly, is like a perfect example of what they would call magic in the game world. It alters the process of how the presents got under the tree, but the truth of the matter and the fact of the matter is not altered. There's still presents under the tree regardless of what explanation you give, and you could say that it's an interpretation which way you want to view it, but for me, obviously in this scenario, and I don't want to like tread too close to being like Reddit debate bro Erika, but like there's still a reality whether you use the embellishment or not. Now you could choose to willingly believe in like the embellishment because it feels better and the result is still the same, but then the question becomes like, do we value truth? Whatever, who cares? Battler also states he is not him. Interesting given the end of the episode. And that's just a joke. He is him, but is also controlled by Lambda or Burn. We'll come back to this. I have a very good analogy for this. Delander mentions how she gave Cornelia, okay, so I mentioned here, the window was never opened after it started raining, yet Cornelia failed to use it, or as Delander says, she is forbidden from using it. Cornelia and Gertrude are servants of Delander, who is under Rika's control in the game. What I mean by that is a Rika summoned thing, so she can probably choose and dictate. All this is to circle back to the point of saying that Rika and Lambda basically kept up this thing. For whatever reason, Rika or Lambda forbid that from happening. I mention it here. Delana notes how despite both Lambda and Rika knowing that Kinzo doesn't exist in 86, I shouldn't say. The yet makes no sense here. They allowed and even propagated the illusion of him existing. They are after something with the info. It seems there's a conspiracy between them. Insinuation that Beatrice desired Battler to meet Angie and Delana, that it wasn't happenstance or interference, that basically she allowed these people to enter the game and there was a purpose behind them entering. It wasn't like an interference of one of the two witches. And this all gets to the point, like how much of this is Beatrice's plan, and we'll get back to that later when we talk about some of the questions, because we're going to write down, once this is done, I will copy all this over, but we're going to, I'm probably not going to copy this because this is useless shit. We'll copy everything from here down into the actual notebook, and, well, I'll copy it after. So for the court scene, I really skimmed this, so there's probably a lot that I missed. Kumasawa and Goda never went to the second floor of the guest house after returning to it until the body discovery. At midnight, the cousins were alive. Those who are dead, save Hideyoshi, who we haven't really doubted, are confirmed to have died. Of note, it's important that he is brushed aside on this, so this is another important thing. Hideyoshi is presumed to be dead, right? We never get a confirmation that he is dead. We kind of just, like, say he is, but he was never stated in red that he was dead, to my knowledge. Genji was still alive at midnight. Rosa refused a towel from Goto and went straight upstairs to the second floor around 1 a.m. Second floor could be reached from outside the building without being noticed, but not from the inside. If someone had got inside even without going through the lounge, Erika is said to have known in red. However, that doesn't mean that she would elect the info. She could just potentially cover for that person. And we talked about that a little bit with like the silent window on the second floor of the guest house, that somebody could have come up there and Erika could have potentially known but not said something for some reason. However, it seems like it would be a little bit counter to her character now. It's very weird because it seems like Burncastle has almost put Erika down as like a red herring to act in a certain way, because it's evident that she... We'll get into this a little bit. There's a weird question about like the motives of everybody behind everything. in the meta level, not like in the game. But let's continue. Ava sealed Genji's room at 1 a.m. Kuma saw and Cannon broken in the morning. Ava did not enter at this time. Genji didn't leave the mansion after midnight. Kraus was murdered after he was on call with Natsuhi. Ava and Erika conspired about the seals after dinner together. They are infallible and of the same type, duct tape. None of them were tampered with. Rosa was the only one to go to the second floor between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. No corpse examination is ever mistaken. All deaths were homicide. Corpses were not other people passed off as victims. A living Kinzo does not exist outside Natsuhi's room. Bullshit, because we know that he's dead, but this is made to mentally break Natsuhi, which is probably the reason why they continued the illusion of Kinzo being alive, etc., etc. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of theory time now when we talk about this. So we're going to break this into two sections. So first, we're going to have meta level questions. This is talking about anything that is a big overarching thing. And then we're going to have like game board questions, okay? The game board questions are going to refer to what we were just talking about, like in the court. Very particular events. We're not really concerned with motives. We're worried about like the actual kinetic explanation for how something happened, how, you know, person X was at this time. Sorry, I'm trying to move my mic stand here. You know, we're worried about the more kinetic explanation in the game board questions about like who done it, how did they do it. We don't care too much about the motive behind it yet. We want the who and the how, not the why. The why question might, there's some why questions as far as the game board, but they are meta level, I think, almost inherently. So we're gonna ask a few things. One, some of these are not going to be able to be answered by me, by the way, I will say as an aside, because they are quite difficult, and they will probably be questions that is like the solution to the game. So, number one, is the Beatrice, or we're going to say, what is Beatrice's goal in the creation of this game? That's one question. I'm going to try and go through my mind. I might add more questions as we go. What level of influence do Lambda and Rika have on the game / have had on the game? Other meta level questions. How much can we trust from the pieces in episode 5, even if they are not actually being piloted by, I'm gonna say, even if there is a pilot mismatch. What I mean by this, you know, Battler not actually controlling his piece, but his piece like moving of its own free will. By free will, okay, being puppeted by someone else. I'm gonna jump down to the game board questions because I think asking some of the game board questions will jog my memory on some of the more meta level things. So number one, I guess the obvious thing. I'm gonna try and keep this relatively focused to episode 5. Like I said, there is some like overarching like big theorizing. There's not a whole ton of. I'll say this at the outset. My suspicion on Rosa has gone up. And I think I said this, it's exactly what I said at the end of the stream. My suspicion on Rosa has gone up. I don't think she has eclipsed Jessica in suspicion yet for me, but she's rising in my suspicion list. Everything else has remained mostly the same. Shannon has jumped up in my suspicion tier list. And Rudolph has also jumped up more. Oops. But I already had Rudolph pretty high up to begin with, you know? So it's not really modifying that much. Game board questions. One, I mean, the knock plus letter dilemma. Who done it? How done it? Next question. Also, I'm gonna put up here, who done it? How done it? What was the other things? I actually think this is an okay starting point, and I'll expand on these as we go. So for some of the questions here, we know the game is related to Battler's sin in some degree. His presence on the island seems to be the match for a powder keg, which results in the murder of everyone on the island. So, number one. But we have like a better question about this as well, right? Is we know of a lot of intentionality on Beatrice's part. Angie, inclusion, Delanner, etc. All of the characters that were added. These characters might not serve a purpose on their own, but if we think about this, like Delanner and Angie, I think, for example, are a very good thing to bring forward, that like the existence of those characters being brought forward for Battler helps him reason in such a way. The thing that we... Oh, okay. And there's another meta level question here. What do they mean by the game was created to be solvable, I should say, by Beatrice? So, when I say here, the Angie inclusion, Delanner, etc., all the characters that have been added to this point, but these two, I think, are like the prime exemplars of this. They both existed to prove something to Battler, right? This was true so far. But both of them were defined, or they were included in such a way to help reason. So Delanner's big inclusion is I don't want to belabor the point on this because we talked about it a lot in the last stream, is that Delanner exists to wall off the possibilities of the game, right? Otherwise, you do have this like infinite vast ocean of what we could call magic, and we never really burrow down into getting anywhere closer to a real explanation because it doesn't do anything, you know? Like I'll say that I'll make the point real quick and I'll shelf it because I don't want to, like I said, I want to try and I'm already approaching an hour in this stream. I want to hopefully be done this in 2 hours at most. So, Delanner, she exists to constrain the game in some way. It's part of the reason why I noted in the study hall how many of these statements of Nox were said in red. These were all invoked in red, right? Now, there could be a little bit of wiggle room with them. And there was the talking point about, like, does the game really follow the Decalogue? And this will come down to this question of the game being solvable by Beatrice. I'm actually going to put this here because it more links. Delanner has to exist, or someone like Delanner has to exist at some point in the story, because if not, we actually are stuck with the endless ocean of magic being, like, the solution. And that doesn't ever get us a satisfying answer, right? One of the big things is Delanner basically shows up to tell Battler, the game, okay, it's going to have a satisfying conclusion. These are some rules that mystery writers generally use such that the explanation is satisfying to you. A mystery that is not satisfying is not a good mystery. If magic is real in the actual, like, so I've mentioned this multiple times, I believe in the possibility of magic existing outside of the game board. Like, when we're talking about the Golden Land, when we're talking about all that, sure, whatever, I don't really care about that. When I'm specifically not agreeing to magic, I'm talking about not believing magic in the actual kinetic events that are happening on the game board in terms of how the events play out. I don't think anybody's being killed by magic. I don't think there's any, like, things like that. What I mean by this is that magic is sort of a... It's sort of a... I said earlier, I'm sure there's a better term for this. I call it the god of the gaps, because you've laid out your entire argument. We've laid out all the things that we can explain, and in the areas where we finally find things that are unexplainable, we go, okay, that must be magic. We're filling in magic in the cracks of our theories, so that the theory looks whole, but in reality it's rotten to the core, it's filled with cracks. It doesn't really make much sense, but magic can smooth everything over. That's not satisfying. If we look at the Brawn Tube example, I brought this up a while ago, and I'll repeat it again. The big thing with the Brawn Tube example that was given is that the Brawn Tubes have two competing explanations. And if we were to look inside the Brawn Tube, much like a, I don't want to get into QM shit, because QM is, like, so misunderstood. I don't even think I would use superposition in this explanation, but as far as it appears to us from the outside, we have a superposition of explanations where something is both. Well, actually, that's not even true, because no, see, I don't want to use superposition because it doesn't make sense, because superposition is actually occupying two states at once, and we wouldn't say that it occupies both magical and physical at the same time. I think that's a little bit goofy. Throw that out. When we look at the whole Braun tube example, it's actually talking about a classical ignorance problem. We can refer this actually back to QM to make an example. One of the big misconstruations, not a word, one of the big misinterpretations or failings of understanding, and I'm not going to fault people because QM is very confusing, and, you know, depending if you watch this 200 years in the future or something, you know, maybe I'm wrong, I'm speaking on bullshit. This is my understanding as well, so you know what, you can call me a dumb fuck in the comments. But there's a big misinterpretation that people usually do with QM where they confuse superposition and classical ignorance. So, to give an example or an analogy, a lot of people will think that superposition is just not knowing. So when we talk about the Schrodinger cat box, that in reality, there is a dead cat or an alive cat inside the box, but we don't know what it is yet. But so most people would say, oh, well, the cat does. Like, the cat is dead or alive already, prior to you ever looking into the box. The cat is not in superposition. You just don't know what state the cat is in. Now, we can get into arguments about macroscopic level arguments about how a lot of quantum mechanical properties don't really apply to, like, really macro scale things. Sure, okay. But to give a better example of classical ignorance that makes a little bit more sense, and I would say, to me at least, helps show the absurdity of the question being posed. When we talk about superposition, I want this turned into a QM lecture. Superposition means, as far as we currently understand, something is actually occupying more than one state at once. It's not just a lack of knowledge on something. Because a classical ignorance, which is a lack of knowledge on something, would be the very same as if I took a deck of cards out of you, toss the jokers, and I shuffle it, so we have 52 cards. I pull a card out, and I'm showing you the back of the card, and I say, I want you, and let's presume that somehow... Actually, let's presume that the card is, like, covered in ash or something, right? And we pick it up out of a deck that was fully spilt on the floor, 52 pickup, right? The cards are covered in ash, so you can't tell, even on the playing side, what's on it, right? And I pick up this card, and I say, okay, tell me, what card is this? What is the identity of this card? Now, you might sit there and you might say, or you might misinterpret the QM explanation and say, oh, the card is actually in a superposition of all possible states, of all 52 other possible cards. And it's only by virtue of you drawing the card, or in this example, what I'm going to say, wiping the ash off to actually see what the playing number is, that it collapses down into a possibility. But that's not really the same thing. Because in the card example, we're talking about you having knowledge that is being obscured from you, right? Whereas in QM, it's not actually the same thing. The QM example would be like, oh, the cat is actually both alive and dead, and it's not that you measuring is like what causes the cat to begin living or dying. It's just that you have a state where something can occupy both, and the idea, this is where you start to get in different interpretations. You have like the many worlds interpretations, right? That when you open up the box and you witness the cat will be alive or dead, but it's not that all along the cat was actually dead, or if it was the alternate possibility that all along that the cat was actually alive. In that, it's that superposition, the cat was in both states, but by virtue of you observing the cat and viewing it, the world line basically, I don't want to say world line, it's like a Steins Gate thing, but you've basically said, okay, this is the world that we exist in. And there is an equal and an identical world up to the point where that cat is alive in the other world or dead in the other world. Basically, it's the opposite of whatever we have. I don't want to get bogged in QM shit because it's very confusing and I probably don't even have a great understanding of it. All this to say, I don't think we can argue that there's a superposition. The game is trying to pose it as though, because when you say superposition, people think it's like, oh, it's like it could be one or the other, but you don't know. Whereas superposition is actually being both. You can also think about it in like binary computer systems. Like, let's say that we were to look at like any given bit and we wanted to know if it was a 0 or a 1. Well, in a quantum computer, it's not like, oh, we don't actually know if it's 0 or 1. No, the quantum qubit or whatever, I don't know what the correct term for it would be, literally behaves as both a 0 and a 1 at the same time, right? And depending on the measurement or the current applied or blah, 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 in whatever way, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about quantum computing, you can make it act more as a 0 or a 1, but the initial qubit prior to any interference is one or the other, or is not one or the other. It is both. I don't like the idea that we can say that the Braun tube example in this game, I just give a random like 5-minute lecture on QM that was probably 90% wrong, but the confusion about that is that we've been given this idea. This is not a QM problem where it's like, oh, it could be both magic and physical explanations. No, this is like a classical ignorance problem. It's being presented as though it is both, or that it occupies both, but it doesn't really. It really is only one of them. And the Braun tube example is sort of a farce, because at least in like a QM system or something, you could describe both possibilities. You know, if something was like, or if it was up to interpretation. This is why I don't really like the word interpretation, because you can have an interpretation, but there is always going to be, and I don't want to get down into like epistemological shit, but there's going to be like a certain point where we get to like a truth statement, a fact of the matter. One of the good talking points about this is when people, like, when the ancient Greeks were talking about like the oceans and rivers and lake beds and everything, and they were saying, there is this substance that fills it that we call water. Would we say that because what they thought water was at its core was different? They had a different model to describe it. You know, they had the 4 elements and whatnot. But they were referring to the same thing, right? But then we get into a weird conversation. It's like, oh, well, are we only actually referring to like, are we referring to the actual fact of the matter, or are we referring to our understanding of that object? Because I think everybody would agree, well, it seems like the ancient Greeks were probably referring to the same thing as us, even if their model was incorrect. To circle back to that with the Braun tube, the difference is in all these other things and all these other different interpretations, these other interpretations are actually providing reasoning. It could be wrong reasoning, right? Which is why it doesn't map on to the real fact of the matter when we eventually, I mean, even now we're probably wrong to some degree, and we'll find out more later. But up until that point, right, the other side is not giving explanations. They're not telling us an explanation. They're just saying unexplainable, therefore magic. That's not an argument. It is literally classical ignorance. It's just saying you can't know, right? Oh, it could be magic because you can't know. You can't know that it's not. So magic then only doesn't exist once I can prove that it isn't, right? It's only not magic once I have 100% confirmed that it isn't, and up until that point, well, in that reality, the way that magic is defined by that, to me it feels a little bit goofy. And we're going to get into like the embellishment thing about whether or not magic exists. I am starting to have doubts more and more whether or not the real Beatrice believes that magic is a real thing. And by a real thing, I don't mean like the explanation that Virgilia and Delanar gave about it being an embellishment. But if we talk about literally casting spells or summoning people, things of that sort, if we literally believe that it is a real thing that is happening, right? That is a interesting conversation to talk about, because I don't think the real Beatrice thinks that there actually is magic, right? So I'm going to go down to here. We'll say, we know this game was made to be interpreted by Battler. Okay? We know this for sure because at the end of episode 4, we were given this whole spiel about how not Asumu's son, blah, blah, blah. You know, all that dog shit. And even though he wasn't Asumu's son, he was still Battler, and he was still Kinzo's grandchild, so he still qualified. This game was made, and that whole thing was probably also intentional by Beatrice, which we'll come back to. Part of me wonders how much of all of this, we joked about in how episode 3 that it was like, oh, how much of this was like, Beatrice giving up the Death Note and it was all part of her plan. I wonder if the entire game up to this point, even the interference of Lambda and Beatrice was predicted by Beatrice, and so this entire game... Well, okay, let's get this out of the way too. I want to do this now. And my question is, what was her goal in the creation of the game? Because I think we can start to narrow down. I'm not saying these are the only 2 possibilities, but these are like the 2 explanations that fit out, or that stick out the most in my mind. So we have number 1, which is Beatrice started this game for whatever her initial goal was, and it was hijacked by Lambda Delta. So I want you to follow me, because this is going to be a little bit confusing, and I have a few explanations that are going to be running like kind of counter to each other. So one explanation I can think, Beatrice created this game in service of whatever reason she created it. The game gets hijacked by Rika and Lambda. She wasn't expecting this intrusion into the game, right? Now, there's that possibility. There's also the possibility that she created the game. She knew that Rika and Lambda, or she knew there was the possibility that somebody else was going to interfere with the game, right? We have these great witches. We know they're voyagers. We know they go fragment to fragment. They're trying to be entertained. I don't remember if Beatrice specifically invited them or not. That's the only thing I don't remember. I don't know if they decided to show up or if she invited them. If she invited them, even more so. I think there's two possibilities. I think Beatrice either created the game ahead of time, either invited both Lambda and Rika knowing they would show up, or just for whatever reason, she knew they were going to come to interfere in the game. And this whole game has been set up for one of two purposes in that timeline. I'm actually going to open up MS Paint here because this is going to be like sort of hard to describe. I think it helps more visually. So let's put this here. Oops, nope, that's not what I wanted to do. So first things first, we have two timelines, right? So we have the timeline here where Beatrice, this is her, oops. This is Beatrice creates, we'll shorten this. Beatrice creates the game knowing that it will be interfered with / she invites the interference, okay? Let's put this down to like 10-point font. Okay. So we have this. She creates the game, she knows that it's going to be interfered with, or she invites the interference. This is like the equivalent to inviting it. So then there's two possibilities here, and this has to go with what Beatrice's ultimate goals are. So I have one path which I'm more confident in, which we'll put here. And then we have another one which I'm less confident in, that will go up here. So this next path is that Beatrice, right? We heard about how she was created by Lambda Delta. I don't know how much of that is true. We'll get into that in a little bit. But let's just say, for instance, that Beatrice is not a full-blown... This is like probably very unreadable for you guys on stream. Let me make this like 14-point. Beatrice is not a full-blown witch. She invites Rika plus Lambda to her game to outmaneuver them. Is that really not how you spell outmaneuver? EU... Oh, it's ER, not RE. It's probably a difference in English versus US spelling. To outmaneuver them in some way so she can become a real great witch. So, I'm going to expand on this real quick. The reason why I say this is that... I'm going to put a little spoiler talk up here for Higurashi, so I apologize. Rika in the game, or Burn Castle in this game, I keep calling her Rika. Rika exists because of Higurashi. The way that the game kind of dropped it in was that Lambda Delta trapped Rika inside Higurashi when Rika was still a human, and Rika outsmarted Lambda Delta to become a great witch. And now she is a Voyager witch. Maybe Beatrice is only a witch of her fragment, right? Maybe she's not even a full-blown witch. She might just be a human, and that the Beatrice that we've been interacting with the entire time is like a figment. But I would imagine that she is a witch to some degree, but she's not on the same level as Rika or Lambda, right? Now, I think we know that Lambda, at least as she has described, and whether or not her intentions are true and whether or not we know, Lambda has some grudge against Rika because she lost to her in the game board of Higurashi. Rika beat Lambda in Higurashi, and because of that was able to become a witch in some form or fashion. I think that Beatrice is trying to perform the exact same thing, and she's trying to get both of them. Now the better question is, there's two possibilities here from this very next step, which goes like this. It's either that A... We'll put here, Beatrice wants to, or simply wants to beat them. Or I should say like a greater witch. Extend this. So we have explanation 1. Beatrice simply wants to become a greater witch. Actually, I don't think I need this. I think I did this wrong. Don't worry about it. I don't think I need this branch. Well, actually, no. Okay, so technically this is going to... I did this so dumb. I should have put this one up here because this is going to end up in the same result, but it's a different explanation. Beatrice simply wants to become a greater witch in the outside world and invited the two to outsmart them. So in the very same way that Rika, you know, had set up... Or the way that Rika broke the game board of Higurashi to become a witch, Beatrice wants to outmaneuver these two's interference because by inviting them, she knows that Rika and Lambda are going to interfere in the game, right? And she wants to win, and by beating them in the same fashion that Rika won in Higurashi, she's going to become a next witch, right? Now, going to drop this. So because knowing that info, right, we know Beatrice. The other greater question is, maybe Beatrice doesn't like witches, right? Maybe it's possible that she isn't actually a fan of witches. Maybe Beatrice herself doesn't actually believe in magic, and this whole thing has been a farce the entire time. Beatrice invited Rika plus Lambda. We don't know how many great witches there are. It seems like there's a lot, given the way they talked about it. Beatrice invited Rika slash Lambda to not only maneuver them, but to also kill them. To trap them in the game she has created, and to eliminate them and plus herself, plus potentially witches as a whole. Now, that's a pretty grand thing to say. Now, what I'm going to say is that for both of these, we'll put it back up here because I did this in like the stupidest way possible, and now I know that I don't need it like this, but let me just, here we go. Okay, pretend that that was never there. And so then, both of these two things, they require the same outcome. That same outcome is so we'll word it like this. That Beatrice knows she's incapable of defeating Rika and Lambda of her own power, and as such created the entire game to groom Battler's magical talent such that he could do so in her stead. The other possibility that I was going to write over here, which we'll write, is that sorry, I'm just going to write this out because it's all in my mind. Trying to see. And then this would basically feed into this. So these are the two possibilities, right? Technically it's like 3. And then there's 2 end possibilities from this. That... Well, so... this is like the worst document I've ever made in my life. Holy fuck, this is so beyond, like, readable in the way I set it up. This is why you should plan things before and not do it on the fly. But so, we'll put this as branching point 1, okay? And then, like, who cares? Look at this, this makes no sense. This is the end goal, okay? We'll put this in a nice golden circle right here. So, I'll follow the line now from the top so that it all makes sense. She created the game knowing that it will be interfered with. So this is, we should put in reality above this because this sort of disagrees with this statement. Which is why, actually, delete this. So this is the alternate explanation. So this is explanation 1 here. Okay, this is explanation 2. They both end up feeding into the same possibility. So explanation 1, Beatrice created the game knowing that it will be interfered with, so she invites the interference of the 2 greater witches. Okay. Beatrice is not a full-blown witch. She invites Rika plus Lambda to her game to outmaneuver them in some way so she can become a real great witch. Beatrice simply wants to become a greater witch in the outside witch world and invited the 2 to outsmart them in the game, I should have put. Beatrice invited Rika plus Lambda to not only outmaneuver them, but to also kill them, to trap them in the game she has created and eliminate them plus herself plus potentially witches as a whole. This part, you know, we put a little bit of doubt on. but she might want to eliminate them and become like the only thing. However, the end result is that Beatrice knows she's incapable of defeating Rika and Lambda of her own power, and she created the entire game to groom Mattler's magical talent such that he could do so in her stead. So, in episode 2, in explanation 2, the alternate explanation is that Beatrice and the entire game board, I don't want to say necessarily the game board, but like the game board was hijacked, the game board was created by Lambda Delta in the same way that it seems like Higurashi was created by Lambda Delta. The entire game board was a fiction created by Lambda Delta to destroy Rika for the events of Higurashi. Beatrice becomes cognizant of her role in the game and the fact that she is simply a promoted pawn of Lambda Delta's and wishes to abort the game such that she isn't trapped in it for all eternity and all the other pieces aren't trapped in it forever as well. Beatrice knows she's incapable of defeating Rika and Lambda of her own power and such she created the entire game, or we shouldn't say created, we should say, or like hijacked, I guess, or whatever. Whatever, you know what I mean. Created, modified, hijacked in some way, modified the entire game to groom Battler's magical talent such that he could do so in her stead. So she's basically, this doesn't really make sense in like a chess analogy, but you would think that she is a piece on the board. She is a literal, like, one of the chess pieces on the board, but she is trying to find a way as a piece on the board to beat the two people playing the game. Because if we talk about the actual, I guess I can make this work again. If we talk about the whole idea of what's been going on in the story, we have like, down here at the very bottom of the chain, right? Or at the top of the chain, I guess we could say. Well, I guess this is where it starts to get weird because it depends on the interpretation or what theory we want to rock with. But so we have Rika versus Lambda. Now I'm also going to say, and again, this is one of those things that I mentioned earlier, that it's where I feel like I'm starting to throw every possibility into the wind. So it starts to become a little bit, not like, it's like I'm covering every base, so I can't be wrong. But okay, it's just competing theories, and we're going to see which one lands. Rika versus Lambda is like the big overarching thing, right? Then this feeds into, we have, oops. Why did that, I was literally typing. We have Beatrice versus Battler, and then underneath Beatrice versus Battler is like, if we put it in here, we would say, the problem is that, put it in brackets. So this is like one way that we could view it, right? That, of course I put a bracket, look, who cares? That the full actual story is Rika versus Lambda. This is the war, okay? This is the battlefield. Or I should say, this is the war, this is the battle, and then these are like the battlefields, okay? God, this mouse is shit. The only thing that is, if we're talking about some of these, we would also say that Beatrice, knowing that she would become a piece of this game, has done something to disrupt this. However, there is another possible explanation, which is that all along, and this could be, this sort of breaks the upper part because it doesn't really work. The second line works with this explanation, the first line doesn't. The first line is basically this that I just drew here is this top line, explanation 2, where Beatrice realizes that, you know, she's a pawn, all of this has been hijacked, she realizes it's futile, she's blah blah blah, and so she's doing this to get back, and potentially she could become a witch. The problem is, like, you could sort of like mix and match. This is kind of like Mad Libs, where there's like a lot of blank spots that we could probably slot in explanations and other things. So how do I word this? So we have like a few things that are, we have two questions. Was the game interfered with, or was it created? It could be both, or it could be, well, so it was created no matter what. Was the game created and it's been running as to her plan the entire time, and the interference was expected? Or, I'm replying to my girlfriend. So, as I said, there's two possibilities. The game was created by someone that's not Beatrice, and Beatrice is just a piece in the game. and we are like the pieces revolting against our masters, or the game was actually created by Beatrice, and then it was either A, hijacked by the two greater witches, or this is all like a 400 IQ play, right? I'm just gonna save this. Let me cover this for a second. I don't know where it's gonna save. I don't want it to show anything bad. I don't think it will. Save, downloads, save. Yes, save, close. Okay. Let's get back to our notes. So we have like two theories on the creation of the game. So let's put this. Did she create the game? Or did Lambda? Lambda insinuates in episode 3, I think it's question mark / TP, I just don't remember what it is, that she gave Beatrice the power she has. And that the overarching narrative is Lambda versus Rika, yet they seem to be, I would say, the two Voyager witches seem to be far too friendly for them to be at each other's throats, to the point where it feels like they are working together in episode 5. Okay? So we have that. If Beatrice created the game, I think she probably expected the interference of Lambda in her game. Maybe this fragment was Beatrice's and was her game, but it was hijacked. Now the question is whether or not she knew, I should say. Okay, let's just say, maybe this fragment was this is so not English. Was Beatrice's game, but it was hijacked. And the question is whether or not she expected the hijacking, or if it was present from the outset. Okay? I think Beatrice is trying to either A, revolt against Lambda plus Rika and delete the game board / flip the game board and outmaneuver the two, potentially to delete the fragment entirely, or to, I don't think you delete fragments, potentially to ruin the game / halt it, or to become a greater witch herself, much the same way that Rika became a witch by besting Lambda in Higurashi. Okay? So we have this. She created the game, did Lambda. Lambda insinuates episode 3 thing that she gave Beatrice the power she has, that the overarching narrative is Lambda versus Rika, yet the two Voyager witches seem to be far too friendly for them to be at each other's throats, to the point where it feels like they're working together in episode 5. Maybe this fragment was Beatrice's game, but it was hijacked. The question is whether or not she expected the hijacking, or if it was present from the outset. I think Beatrice is either trying to A, revolt against Lambda plus Rika and delete the game board, and outmaneuver the two to potentially ruin the game and halt it, become a greater witch herself, the same way Rika did, or B, she is a piece on a game board that was created by Lambda, and this game was never hers to begin with, but she is trying to perform a mutiny of sorts to potentially not just delete the board plus herself, but to revolt against the witches for trapping her and all the Ushiromiyas in the game board for all eternity. So we can say this. Now we're going to get into things that potentially ruin this, right? Because this is where I would start to say that I think Beatrice made this game at the outset. And we're going to get into why. So, we know of this game. We know this game was made to be interpreted by Battler, hence the post-Chapter 4 stuff. I think the entire game is made to be solvable by Battler via rejecting magic in such a way that will grant him magic in the meta world. What I mean by this is that, meaning that the game itself has no magic, but Battler's presence, but the explanations are not magical, but the outside world may have a magical twinge. Imagine all along I'm doing all this crazy theorizing and like the two worlds, or the two Rokenjima theory is actually true. That I put back however long ago about there being like actually two worlds that are merging with each other. So, let me reword this. If we know the game was made to be solvable by Battler, Beatrice should know his inclination to deny magic, leading me to believe that the entire game has a solution that does not invoke magic in the slightest. Basic reasoning of that being, we would have already known about Kinzo, right? We know that Battler has his blood very strongly, that he is super like magically stunted, or that he has very high magic resistance. She knows that Battler, we posited a while ago that maybe the reason why she had the game against Battler was because she wanted him to be the one. He is like the most magical resistant person, and so if she could get him present on the game board to believe in magic, it would cause everybody on the island to believe in it. I don't think she wants him to believe in magic, and I'm going to start to get to my real point is I don't think the Beatrice that created this game believes in magic. I think she is trying to... You can almost use it like a carrot on a stick, that there's a mystery that magic is being used as an explanation, and she knows because of Battler's disposition, the very fact of dangling magic in front of him will make him fight harder to disprove it, and then that will also serve her own goals. Leading to believe the entire game does not invoke magic in the slightest. This raises the question about whether or not the Beatrice, we should say of the game board probably, slash creator, slash I should say culprit, actually believes in magic. It would seem as though they don't. However, they are keeping up the appearance of it being a real thing anyways, which must serve their ends in some way. My point being, I don't think the creator of this game, as far as the game board goes, believes that magic is real. So, we'll leave that there. I don't think there's a whole lot more that I can expound on that. What level of influence do Lambda and Rika have on the game, slash have had on the game? The real question here is whether or not the game can be thought of as a fight between Lambda plus Rika on a meta level, or if they are actually working together to fight against Beatrice in some way that is not understandable to us. Or I shouldn't say not understandable, that is not clear to us yet. So this is basically just going to get back into the exact same question. Is this actually Lambda plus Rika, or are they working together to fight against Beatrice, and this is all like a sham, right? So we have that. This is where I thought of this thing last night, okay? And I know someone's going to be like, yeah, dude, that's literally the point, but I thought this analogy was like fucking perfect when I was thinking about this. Was that, if we think about it like this, with how much can we trust from the pieces in episode 5, because we had this really big talking point about, oh my god, like what is going on with the pieces? How much can we trust? Can we trust anything that the Battler does, because he's not really being piloted by us? But think about it like this, and I'll write this down as I do it. Even if the pieces on the board are able to be controlled in some way by somebody, we know from what Virgilia said that the pieces can still only act in ways they would be able to. Lambda plus Rika cannot move the pieces in ways that break the rules of the game or to make moves that are impossible for the pieces themselves. However, they can make moves they may not otherwise make. So, what I mean by this analogy, you and I are playing a chess match against each other. For some reason, partway through the match, I get sick and I have to leave. And my brother, who I don't have because I'm an only child, and my brother takes over the game. Okay? He inherits the positions and the pieces I was playing with. However, at its core, you two are still playing chess against each other. A rook is still a rook. A pawn is still a pawn. You can't move the pieces in ways that are not allowed by the rules of the game. However, my brother, in the same situation as me, may make different moves. Explaining how we could have a wildly different result despite the same game. So, I thought I was cooking with gas when I came up with this. And I know someone's probably like, yes, this is literally like the point. But, and yes, the game does basically tell you verbatim, okay? But my point is, I thought this was really cool. You and I are playing chess, so we can view this as Beatrice versus Battler, right? They're playing chess against each other. There's moves that only they can make. In this reality, though, well, yeah, so we'll say it like that. Sure. But then the problem is, Lambda and Rika are kind of like playing against each other because we both kind of abdicate from the game. In this analogy of like Umineko, both of us get sick or we step away from the game for a little bit, and two other people sit down to take our place and play the game in our stead. The only thing that's weird about that is that like they're still playing chess, they're still playing the rules, you know, the pieces still can only be constrained in the ways that they can move. A knight is always a knight, a rook is always a rook, a pawn is always a pawn, etc. These things. They can't break the rules of the game, otherwise they're not playing the game. But, you know, maybe I might be like, oh, knight c5, I don't know, chess things, but I might make like knight c5, you might be like, oh, bishop fucking like e8 or something, you know, like in the exact same position, we might make different moves. That's the whole point, but it's still the same game. So we can still trust what the pieces do. I think a better way to word this is that, I think I made the example in the last stream that it's kind of like taking the best chess player in the world versus like Stockfish or something, where Stockfish can't move pieces to break the game board, but it's going to make moves that are kind of inconceivable or maybe imperceptible to humans. And I think that that's like a good example of this, that Rika and them might be much better pilots of our things, right? To the point where, you know, Erika can find and solve everything and etc, 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 etc. All that can happen. Yet somehow, still on the very same token, it's still possible. Which is why Rika, I mentioned somewhere in the notes, I think, that like Rika was surprised by Battler's like literary knowledge, right? And it's sort of like a little toss-in thing where she's like, oh, like, look at that big counter. And she's like countering her own piece with that, because at that point, we're kind of insinuated that Rika is the one that's controlling it. But the reality is, like, she can't make Battler do things that he is incapable of, which means that he was capable of it to begin with. It's kind of the same thing that Delaner, after the study scene, she comes to Battler in the Golden Land and she's giving him his flowers for the great fight that she had against him, even if the fight was being tampered with or something. That they had that fight that was going on between the two of them, and even though it wasn't Battler that was piloting his piece, which I mentioned where Battler said in the Golden Land, like, oh, that's not even me, that's being controlled by Lambda or being controlled by Rika, sure. But the reality of the situation is, those were still possibilities that only you could do. Even if I had, like, let's say that somehow you could do, like, a consciousness mind swap with, like, the best athlete on the planet. So I'm talking to, like, let's say I'm Ilya Tupuria, right? Ilya Tupuria can, like, mind meld his brain into mine. I can get all his knowledge and all his technique and all the proper way to do these things, but there might be moves that just because of, like, the different levels of athleticism or the ways that our bodies are built, there might be things that he is incapable of doing in my body that he would otherwise be able to do, or maybe he could use my body in a way that is capable for me to do, but that maybe I wouldn't otherwise be able to do because I lack the knowledge. All that being said, I'm sort of circling the same point. Everybody gets the analogy. There you go. Solution to the epitaph. We're going to come back to this. And I'm just going to put like a general suspicions category here, so we'll just say general suspicions plus updated suspicion. Oh my god, I realized my mic was muted. I don't know how long I've been muted. Holy fuck, I have to check the VOD now. Oh my god, don't tell me I don't think it was that long. I think I probably just pressed it by accident. I need to unbind that key. That key is way too close to where I type. Holy fuck. I'm so glad I caught that. 1 second. I need to look at the VODs. Watch. Go to the VOD page, please. No. How long was I muted? I think I was muted for like 3-4 minutes. Wait, no, I can hear myself. Wait, I have to mute the game audio. I can hear myself typing in this, so I'm not muted, I'm just not talking. Okay, yeah, I definitely was muted for like at least a few minutes there. Okay, my bad. Yeah, let me unbind that key real quick. Just so I don't do that ever again. I did it because I have like, I want to like sniffle or something. I need to move it to like a much more not pressable key. Let's do it like there. And this doesn't, okay, it doesn't do anything now. Okay, sorry, my bad on that. Let me close that, and then let me return the game audio. So I was muted for like 5 minutes at most. Okay, sorry. Let me get everything back up on screen. Okay, so I don't know how much I missed, but I'm just writing down like the general things, like the knocking, the letter, and the general statement so that we're going, okay, I can see it was right here, because that's when I did it. No one outside the mansion could influence anything inside the mansion after 2400. After the start of the family conference. Okay. Impossible for anyone outside to knock means hitting a door with their hand. So. And let me go back up here for like the letter stuff, because I know I put... Copy this. Was there anything else that was... Okay. Sorry, this is just very like, I'm trying to make all the pieces fit together. There's a mention of a way to drop letters that doesn't actually place them. For a machinist rigged to drop a letter and place it at a set time after given motion. Okay. I'm getting more and more convinced that I think I have an idea, and it doesn't really make sense because I don't know. Look, I'm gonna liken this to the equivalent of like, I know how a car, if I put a key in the ignition of a car and turn it, it starts and the car drives, but I probably couldn't describe to you every chain in that process that allows it to happen. But I think I might have some of the parts, and again, I'm thinking word games, right? This entire time I'm playing this game, I'm thinking word games. And the one thing here that I noticed is when she says that a knock must be done with a hand, and it was done on the door to the dining hall, right? Now, the only problem is this is the part that kind of breaks what my brain theory was on the door to the dining hall. We also know that, like, so this is the thing, no one would misidentify or mistake a knock as anything other than a knock. See, the weird thing is it says, meaning it was not recording or something, but I'm pretty sure later on in that exact thing, Erika posits that she could have like a tape recorder playing a knocking noise. Hmm. I'm actually gonna go to that scene real quick. We're gonna play through this real quick. Or no, sorry. Ooh, I dropped a lot of frames at some point, but I don't really give a fuck. It's too late, and I know only noticed now. And it seems like we're okay. So we want it to be this. We're going to be skipping through most of this, by the way. In fact, we're probably not even going to be playing it. We have to watch this fucking clock spin, though, unfortunately. So I just want to scroll down to read the exact statement that Rika gives. Okay. Previous chapter. Previous chapter. Okay, next, 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 next. Previous. No, see, it just cycles it. So we're just gonna do one of these real quick. I don't care about like watching the scene replay because I already took notes. I want to see the red statements and the blue statements that Erika gave. Okay, yeah. Am I slow? When does this happen? Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe it was here? Okay. There's no way it was this far back. It was before the court scene. I'm positive it was. Am I slow? Like, did I skip over it? Like... It's not this. Maybe it's in this? Where the fuck did these red statements go, man? They're vanishing. I remember her giving like blue and red statements talking about how the knock happened. Okay. Sorry, I know it's kind of boring. We're just scrolling because I'm looking to see blue or red pop up. I don't really care about anything else. I just don't remember when. Potentially we'll cut this part out of the VOD. Okay, they're already dead at this point. This is the scene of her talking about being the detective. We follow here, up to this point. I'll probably cut this out, the searching point. This is... See, there's blue statements, that's not what I'm talking about, though. I want to know about the knock. There's no fucking way it was in the court scene, bro. Okay. Is it actually in that fucking... Dude, I know it's not. Am I going fucking crazy, man? Is it later than I think it is? I have notes on it, for fuck's sake, so I know it happened. I don't get this. There's no fucking way. There's no way it was this late. I know it wasn't. I know it wasn't this late. I know it fucking wasn't this late. I'm doing something wrong. I must be... It has to be in the knocking chapter. It has to be in this, and it's just not a blue statement. Am I, like, scrolling too fast that it's, like, vaporizing? I just don't believe that. I need the part where Rika is talking to Cornelia and them. She's putting a theory forward about who could have done it. Okay. Here we go. We're talking about this. Yeah. Dude, I must be like... Maybe it has to happen after the study scene because Cornelia and them don't exist yet. I thought it was gonna be here, but I don't know. Yeah, I'll cut this part out of the VOD. I don't know what the fuck I'm looking for. Wait, here it is. Is this it? No, this one she's punishing them. Okay, here it is. The witch side will probably say this person is the same who wrote the letter to the witch Beatrice. Stupid trick. Okay. One of those not in the dining hall. We've heard the mansion was locked and that no one outside could get in, but if someone only pretended to go to the guest house. In that case, the problem is the knock. So, the only problem is Lambda later gives a thing that shoots this down. I question whether the knock was even something hitting the door to the dining hall at all, so a fake knock. Maybe such that a certain pillar, blah blah blah. Or they could have misheard some other random sound as a knock, or a tape with the sound knock recorded and could have been secretly playing, which had been carefully set up to be heard. Rudolph would have been the only one able to do that. Looks like a cute little piece. I'll start with the letter. There was that knock when the large clock struck midnight, and when the door was opened, there lay a letter in the envelope bearing the one-winged eagle. The idea that the people who weren't in the dining hall secretly placed that letter in the hallway is such an old one, right? Kraus, blah blah blah. When Shannon and Cannon came in to serve tea, who was the last human to enter the dining hall? Let's say it was Cannon. Wouldn't it be easy if Cannon, the last person in, secretly dropped the letter when they closed the door? Among all those inside the mansion at midnight, not a single one of them placed that letter in the hallway. So you can't say that no one touched it. And I'm gonna fucking kill myself because I right-clicked. Holy fuck, I'm so fucking upset right now. Quick future Connor cut in here. Past me was a dumb fuck, and after right-clicking, I took 5 minutes to find this in the transcript again, so I've cut that out. Okay, back to the video. Okay, here. Jesus. I'm using my fucking keys at this point. Sorry. Can't believe The question of the knock hitting the door at all. Blah, 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 blah. Let's just get to the red statements. Who cares about the blue? They didn't touch the letter. So we know it's definitely not those three in any fashion, because it said didn't even touch. Not a single person placed, so she switched her lettering here. So we're gonna go back down to this. Okay. This is what I agree with Rika on this statement. And they give the serving cart. And these three didn't knock. Yep, we know. It means they didn't use a pillar to transmit the sound or push the play button on a cassette tape. They'd okay, so yes. So Cross Natsu or Genji made that knock, or else a sound that could be misidentified as one. Okay. Possible for anyone who's in the mansion to have been the source of a knocking sound. In this case, anyone includes any people who might have gone undetected or unobserved. Secretly installed it somewhere and set it up so that it would start playing at exactly midnight. Of course, I wasn't in the mansion at midnight. There aren't any problems with that. However, the knock serves to alert. See, this is the weird thing I don't understand. We have like two statements that almost entirely contradict each other. This isn't the limited meaning of them knocking on the door, okay? It means they didn't use a pillar to transmit the sound or push the play button on a cassette tape they'd recorded to create that knock sound by any means. Of course, this includes all direct, indirect, intentional, coincidental, and unintentional means. The only thing I don't understand is she basically says here, okay, so they didn't record a knock sound or create a knock sound. Okay, sure. And then Berncastle says, could be misidentified. No other humans. In addition to Cross, Natsu, and Genji, none of those in the dining hall knocked. We're knocking create. Yeah, sure. Because this would be an intentional knock. Anyone who's in the mansion also includes any unknown person next. Therefore, this literally meant it was impossible for anyone inside the mansion to knock with no wordplay allowed. I don't want to say wordplay. What we might call the guest house. So is she saying that this only applies to the people inside the mansion? Okay. Created a knocking sound on a cassette tape, secretly installed it somewhere, set it up so that it would start playing at exactly midnight. Of course, I wasn't in the mansion. There aren't any problems. There are no problems. However, the knock serves to alert everyone to the existence of the letter, and does so precisely because the letter is on the other side of the door. So they had to have somehow to line up both of them. No one in the mansion placed the letter. No one in the mansion placed it in the hallway. Okay. There's a device on a serving cart that drops the letter when it stops moving. The culprit could predict the cart would probably stop when two knocks at the door in the dining hall, so you might think that in this theory you could cleverly make it so it drops in front of the door. It doesn't work. It would indirectly lead to the placing. That would mean that Shannon and Cannon, who were pushing the cart indirectly and unintentionally, placed the letter there, so even this is no good. Any setup so the letter peels off with the passage of time would mean that the people who pushed the servant cart to that location coincidentally and unintentionally placed the letter here there. At midnight, only Erica George, okay. That's what I'm saying. If someone slipped out right at the time. At midnight, existed outside. The letter might have been stuck to the ceiling of the hallway instead of the servant cart. The ceiling of the hallway is surprisingly high, so even if you just stuck it there out in the open, maybe no one would notice it. This way, it would certainly fall in the corridor and you can slip by the red if someone outside the mansion did this. Never existed on the ceiling. The letter never touched the cart. To influence anything inside the mansion after the start of the conference. Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. They could have had something set up. It also doesn't say it couldn't influence anyone inside the mansion. And then this is where she gets shot down because her thing was invalid. Right here. So I think the way that the game is interpreting it is it seems to say... I think I'm wasting way too much time on this that nobody cares about. At least not created by anyone inside the mansion. Someone outside the mansion set things up with the cassette tape or something to make a knock sound play. Would misidentify knock. That gets shot down instantly. Okay, so... how could it both be somebody's hand? The only thing that I'm wondering... minor Higurashi spoiler. I wonder if this is going to be like a Hanyu bumping noise thing, where... the only thing is that invokes magic. The letter, like, makes more sense, right? Like, with the letter, it's like, oh, there could have been, like... because what I was thinking initially when they said hand, but, like, when they said someone's hand, my initial theory was like, oh, is there something with, like, the hands of a clock, and because the hands of the clock struck 12, it activated, like, the pendulum, and maybe the pendulum, like, bumped. But if it has to be literally a person knocking... yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. The cousin's body is also a weird one because we just... there's too many possibilities, I think, to, like, narrow down who did it. So, look, let's, I wasted so much time. I might just cut this section out of the VOD. This was an entirely pointless section. Look, I'll leave this, but... I feel like this is going to be explained. Oh, dude, it's like, but this feels like the most satisfying mystery to solve. The other thing as well, let me open up this here. We're gonna talk about the solution to the epitaph, okay? So, if we go to Japan, right? You'll see here on the side, this is gonna give away my thing. Yonaguni and Riben, right? I was looking at these because I was thinking about, I typed in the locations of the two places. The actual things themselves are fake in terms of like the actual land addresses. But if we look at these two, right? So if we look at these two, okay? These were two of the locations that the letters were sent to. One of these was Kumasawa's, was sent to Yonaguni Island here. The other was sent to Riben, way up here. Iwajima's right here. I wish I was doing this on stream when I found it, but Iwajima is right here, okay? It's a military base, and we know that Riben Island had something to do with the military. We know a lot of the story of this has to do with the military. This looks like a triangle. And when I was looking at this triangle, let me hide my display for a second. I'll close Firefox because I saved this as a screenshot when I initially pulled it up. So let me open up this screenshot now, and I'll pull it up on stream. I actually kind of want to take a drawing, or like this. Boom. Minimize this. Display capture again. So, if we look at this, it's kind of hard to see, so I apologize. But this is the thing that we drew. This, I'm going to Control C. We're going to open this in Paint. Okay? Can I... What's the aspect lock for this? Is it... Doesn't seem to exist. I want to aspect lock this so I can make it bigger without distorting it. Whatever. We'll rock it like this, I suppose, and we'll just zoom in. So... My thing is, there was a statement that's been stuck in my mind this entire time, okay? And it has to do with Angie. When Angie showed up, she talked about triangulating the location of something, or that the only way that you can find something is by having a different perspective, where 2 points can look upon one. Now, the only thing that's weird to me about this is I don't really know... First thing that we're going to do, okay, we're going to draw lines between them. So we have Riben Island, like right here. And let's say that we draw an island... We draw a line to Iwajima, to here. If we assume it's another island, it's like a little bit military coded. That line's a little bit too... like this, okay. Then we have Yonaguni, and we have this. So it's somewhere like that, okay. This is probably total schizoid theory. And we have it like this. We have like a mostly right-hand triangle here, okay. Or right-angle triangle, right-hand. Notice there's like almost a perfect line that cuts here. Now, what we could do is we could say, well, we want to find like the midpoint, right? Because this is the only other thing that I was wondering is if you were to do like something like this, you know, we know that the epitaph is going to be like a 10-step journey, right? With twilight. So the twilights correspond to like a literal, you know, like 5 days trip or whatever. I don't know why it's not letting me zoom in now. So the interesting thing about this is like we have a few things that are like kind of close to it, but I don't really know. We have Fukuoka here. We have Nagasaki here, another war thing. And then we got like this, Sapporo, this. We know that there was something about Tokyo was mentioned. I just wonder if it has something to do with like locations that fall like near or on the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it would be 10 if you include all these locations. But how is this a 10 Twilights trip, you know? This doesn't really feel like it makes sense. Put it this way, okay? I'm just calling my shot that it's going to have something to do with this triangle, and it's going to have something to do with this. I don't know the language memes, and I don't know everything, so I'm not going to sit here and try. But there is something to do with, like, all these locations that seem to fall, like, almost exactly. And again, these lines are probably a little bit slightly misdrawn, you know, whatnot. It could also be, like, some midpoint memes where it's like, oh, you take, like, the midpoint of this, and then, like, the midpoint of this, and maybe they all, if you to draw, like, lines like this, and like this, you know, you get, like, this location right here, right? So maybe we could say there's, like, something here. Well, it doesn't really look like it, but there is, like, this island. Whatever this is. Whatever these are. You know, there's something here. But again, like, the other thing, too, that we need to consider is that whatever the epitaph is, it's some 10-step, like, thing. It's not... There's something going on. It's not as simple as just... And you have, like, this and this. I think Iwo Jima is important because it makes a perfect triangle. Now, I could be totally schizo posting. I'll totally admit. But it makes me wonder that if you were to look at, like, the line between these, because we know that those locations they gave, they're not going to be nothing. Like, they aren't going to give us locations that mean nothing. So let's say, like, in a weird world, let's say that Riben is, like, the first stop. And then you land here, okay? And then you maybe go from this spot, you go to Sapporo. And then I think these are rivers. If we follow rivers, roads probably follow along the rivers to some degree. So we would imagine that from Sapporo, you would probably go like this to here. Okay, look, we're going to go back to the Google Maps. One second, let me hide my display. Google Maps. I'm trying to think in, like, what way we can make this work. I want it to make sure that it has... I guess it'll show, like, the big cities, but... Okay. Let me take one screenshot here. Of this. Like this. Hokkaido Shinkansen goes this way, and this is Fukushima. Oh, I know you can't see this right now, sorry, I'm just looking. Because we imagine that if it's going to be traveling, they're going to be going by, like, relatively big cities, right? It's not going to be, like, nothing. So let me pull up my display. And let's say that we were going to plan a trip, right? I'm going to do this so that I can draw, because it makes it easier, right? So let's say that we're starting in Riben Island, okay? Let's say this is our start point. We have right here. Okay, from Riben Island, if we look here, you have, like, these places that are pretty close. You would probably go to, like, here. So I'm thinking that it would start with Riben. You would probably land here at whatever Wakanai is. So you go Riben to Wakanai. From Wakanai, close this, I don't want it to distort my thing. From here, the problem is, if you're talking about, like, a day's travel, I'm assuming you would go at the next big city. Asahikawa? I don't know if that's how you would say that. You go Asahikawa, you go here, then from there, you go to Sapporo. Also of note, Rosa went to Sapporo with her boyfriend earlier on in the thing. I want you to remember that. I remember that being brought up in the last episode. Then... it makes me wonder, well, if we're covering, like, this distance, I feel like they could go to, like, whatever this Hakodate place is. We know because they have to get to Tokyo in like 10 steps, right? So we're at Hakodate. Now we're gonna imagine they go to Aomori. Or Aomori, sorry. Read that wrong. Aomori. Now, this is where it gets weird because I think it kind of depends a little bit. But if we look at like the big cities, you have Aomori, you have Hachinohe, you have Morioka, you have Sendai. And I'm assuming there's going to be like at least one big city in between. Iwaki, and then... Because Kyoto is just like a section of Tokyo, I believe, right? I might be wrong about that. But if we follow like this big path, I think the best would be if we follow like the bullet train, because the bullet train path is probably going to make the most sense, right? And it goes all the way up like this, right? It follows this. I don't know where it stops here. I think it merges into something here, right? The only problem is we're kind of skipping the line to that point. But it kind of still follows where we were going. Because it goes down through here, it comes around, and it hits here, right? Okay. We're gonna go with the bullet train theory, okay? We follow this. So the bullet train lands, we're in Aomori. Then we're going to Hachinohe. Hachinohe. Okay. We're following this down. Where would the next city, though? Because this is where it starts to get weird, is that we're probably going to go to Morioka, would be my guess. Morioka. Now, this is where it starts to get funky. Because Sendai might be the next spot. The problem is I'm looking at, like, really major cities is the thing. And it could be, like, a minor city. Then we have Sendai. And now the question is, we're getting, like, pretty close to getting into Tokyo now. How many steps do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sendai, that's a pretty long gap to be straight to Tokyo. I feel like, well, there's multiple Fukushimas, but I think the Fukushima I was talking about was this one up here. Which I think might be the, I don't know if this is the nuclear power plant one. Fukushima also probably means something, so, you know, but I just find it hard to believe. Capital city of the Fukushima prefecture, wait. Because now I'm thinking it's going to be capitals, right? So let's look here. Is Riben a capital of anything? No. What about... No. Wakayama? No. Where's Hokkaido? Does it separate it like this? Hokkaido is Sapporo. Okay. So we have Sapporo on our list. The only thing that I wonder... Let's say, could we make a list of chain of capitals? Asahikawa. Core cities. See, this is weird because it has Asahikawa here. What is a core city in Japan? Core cities are delegated many functions normally. Okay, so they're very like important big cities. Okay, so wait, maybe this list is more important. Because Asahikawa is on this, right? And that's interesting. And then we have Sapporo. Sapporo is almost certainly going to be on both of those. Yup. Sapporo is a designated. So designated, I think, are going to be like the really fucking big ones. These are like the big cities, right? Then you have core cities. These are like, eh. But these are like important cities. These are like your big dogs, right? How many of the ones do we have? So if I go to Aomori, see, it's also there. And I believe it is also up here. So Aomori is up there. So that's important. Okay. Hachinohe. Am I cooking, guys? Am I cooking? I might be cooking. Okay. To be fair, I did follow like the most big city thing. So it's going to... So Morioka is here. What about... Well, if it's down here, it Okay, no, so it's not. Okay. Sendai is one of them. Okay. It's a designated city, so Sendai's very big. Then obviously Tokyo. Where is this being highlighted? Am I slow? I don't see the, oh, here. Okay, so because Tokyo is considered a prefecture, and so Shinjuku is actually the... Okay, interesting. So that's the only one. So Shinjuku might be, All I'm saying is that this does kind of line up. I don't know what Kyoto means. I thought Kyoto was just a part of... Okay, so here we go. Capital city, Japan's largest and most populous island. Okay. Kyoto. Oh, Kyoto's here. Oh, I'm slow. Kyoto and Tokyo are not the same thing. Oh, fuck. That makes this way harder. I fear this is one of the things where I have all the puzzle pieces and I don't know how to put them all together. I feel like I have everything and I can't put them together because this is probably a very like let's say, so how many prefectures are there? Hokkaido is its own. So what I'm trying to think is if we went, let me delete all these. It's nice, I just doxed myself. If we go by each prefecture, and let's say we take one in each. Info to be out there. Okay. Let me one of these over here real quick. Okay. So we need to figure out there's some part in the notes. Really, I could have sworn they said like Kyoto means like end of journey or something. Because I feel like I was cooking there for a little bit. The only question would be like, what the fuck was the point of... Because like if I do a line between Yonaguni, which is here, it kind of just cuts here. We have Kyoto here, we have Kobe, we have Okayama, we have Hiroshima, Kita-Kyushu, Kumamoto. Kagoshima. Okay, look, I don't want to waste too much time on this. The epitaph is going to be important. I don't think I have the ability to solve it. All I'm going to say is that where is that spot that was... It was here. Matsue was the... Huh. Although Jima just means islands, that doesn't really mean anything. I was like, oh, that sounds like Rokenjima, but most of them are going to end in Ima, because I think that's just the thing for islands. But it was around here was like the... Like if we open up this, and if we... take a screenshot of this area. Right? We know that Yonaguni is like down here somewhere. Right? So Yonaguni is like here. Problem is Iwajima is like literally invisible on that screenshot because it's so fucking not visible. Because it's here. It's this island. Or no, I lied. What? It's somewhere around here. Here it is. Yeah, it actually is just invisible at that scale. So it's like right here. And if you connect the two of them, it was somewhere here in this area. We have like Matsue. 17th century castles! Wait! Wait! I think we fucking cooked. Wait. Pause. I think we cooked. Maybe I've cooked too hard that I've burnt. Matsue to Kyoto. End of journey. Why does it keep showing my address? Holy fuck. It keeps fucking pulling up my... It's actually not where I live anymore, but it keeps showing up my parents' address, okay? And that's not... I'm not allowing that to be seen. I'm just pissed off. I don't know why it keeps doing that. But if we do... Matsue to Kyoto trip. Okay? So if this is where we are going... This is a train line, though, which doesn't really follow because we're probably at a time in Japan that I don't know... The trains may have been built, but maybe not. But they talked about something about, like... Well, let's go back to what does the actual epitaph read as well. My beloved home of old. So we know, one, it's related to some place. Kinzo enjoyed as a kid. And when we triangulate from those three locations, it's really close to this city, Matsue. It has a castle, and I remember there being a mention of a castle for some reason. So if we think that it's Matsue, and we know Matsue is also really, well, relative to where we were looking before, it's pretty close to Kyoto. But what is the trip that you would make? I feel like you would go like this. Because we're trying to follow, like, these are roads here, not rivers, right? Yeah. So if we're following roads, and we're starting in Matsue, I'm trying to think... So let's say this is a drive, actually. Sorry, this isn't a train thing. If you follow this, I'm just trying to see if there's any big cities that you pass through. Ugh, because the only thing you gotta think is that this was old, right? This was done a while ago. So driving might not have been as easy. And it might not be the exact same path that you follow. Look, we're gonna just call our shot without wasting too much more time on this. This is so schizoid, like this is so wrong. Okay. Okay, I don't want to waste any more time on that, but we're just going to call that shot, okay? Let me hide this real quick. And close this and make sure I don't leak anything else. Jesus. Okay. Look for the shore the two speak of. And Matsue is on a shore as well. Or of the ocean. Because those locations that we were given, there was something. I don't want to throw in the towel on this mystery, but I feel like I'm not really going to make much progress because I feel like there's like something that I'm missing. The letter portion, we could probably come up with something. There was some way that they placed the letter prior and used some mechanism to deposit the letter at a given time. We just don't know the way that they did it, and it was certainly somebody that was outside the mansion at the time that the family conference was going on. The knocking is the really confusing one that I feel like we're sort of, the only thing that was given is there's like a really small 1-minute window where it was like at midnight. No one in the mansion at 2400 knocked. Well, is there someone that was potentially like, did something and then left? I don't know. But general suspicions. Rosa. Let me change the title. I'll switch this to episode 6 here. Sorry, I was just typing in the new title. I'll get into this in a little bit for why. The only other thing, look, so let's leave the siblings' death thing. We have like way too many question marks. We know that I feel like Rosa's also the only one who was able to have killed the siblings if she did, or to have convinced the siblings of some kind of plot. After 3 a.m. we know nothing happened, because by the time they came back they were already dead. So it had to have been an inside job. And we also get to talk about like Genji, for instance, that there's something that's going on with Genji. That he definitely was up to like no good, because Ava sealed the room and the room was never sealed until morning. Now the only thing that's like They confirmed that Ava didn't enter the room, because I had a theory for a while that maybe Ava entered the room, killed Genji, left, sealed the door, but that doesn't really seem to hold currently anymore because we got confirmation that Ava never entered the room. Okay. Genji was dead inside the room, nobody entered, meaning there's either another entrance to that room that we are not available or that we don't know about. Let me just write all this down. So the thing is, like, we'll say here. Yeah, see, I'm getting more and more convinced about it being people who are dead and there being faked corpses. What I mean by that is that there's certain times where corpses show up and other times, I had talked about this in the past, that I don't trust the identity of the people that were dead. Because now, the problem is, we've had certain things in the past where you might say, oh, well, they guaranteed the identity of corpses. Yeah, but now we're finding out that there's somebody who's able to imitate corpses in such a way that we don't even think they are corpses, right? So, something is obviously not adding up there. Because in this very episode, we basically got a confirmation at the very end. If we go down all the way to the bottom. Okay, we can skip all that shit. This is all the Kinzo shit. I have to pee really bad. Holy fuck. I want to get through this before I go pee. No corpses exist except those of characters, which means that, like, there's not dead people that are being passed off as other people. And when they say that no examination of corpses is ever mistaken, it would seem to follow that the witches may have been faking death this whole time and dancing around the corpse identification rule, in the sense that the corpses, when they are actually corpses, are being correctly identified. However, there is someone capable of faking or passing corpses off as being dead. For example, like mannequins / models of the people. In this case, if those, we'll call them mannequins, were found dead, this doesn't trigger a false statement on corpse IDing, say IDing being wrong, because they aren't even corpses to begin with. However, if a body is showing up, it is guaranteed to be that person. Should we confirm they actually died? Now, this is like a weird one because it's hard to say, I guess. All deaths were homicides. Clues that are not presented. There was something in one of the tea parties. Let's go to the main menu real quick. And we're going to... I want to, like, skim through the, episode 5 tea party real quick. Holy fuck, I have to pee really bad. Okay. There was nothing there. So it might be in the question mark. This is talking about the Decalogue, blah blah blah. Can I see the whole script? No. Okay. Okay. The Red Truth Guarantee. Heart beating once again. Yeah, Beatrice wants you to solve it. These were all... Okay. I think this part is maybe worth going again. I shouldn't suspect that the mystery element is breaking down, but I should instead question why it was shown and suspect the witness. Yeah, we already went over this, yeah. Okay, this is, yeah, this is just the unreliable narrator shit, which we kind of already pressed on. Then I knew. Yeah, he pulls up, it's the gold statement that he makes where he actually like rebuts it so the game is possible again. Yeah. Okay, there's nothing here. I want to see if there's anything listed here. It has not been specified the time of death was during the single hour after midnight, therefore it's possible the crimes didn't occur between midnight. The crime to have been committed between 1 AM and the discovery. Okay, yeah, we already went over all this. Time of the crime's discovery refers to the point at which I let out a scream and everyone gathered there. Even if it was impossible to kill them before that point, it was possible to kill them afterwards. And this is like the fake corpses meme. The deaths of the 4 cousins in the room have been declared with the red truth, and their dead bodies were witnessed by a large number of people, and it's already been declared with the red truth that no examination of any corpse is ever mistaken. To what point did the red truth occur? Have you forgotten, miss? Yeah, this is just like the episode 3 shit all over again. Said that was a 2400 answer session. They were pronounced dead at 2400 on the second day, in other words, at the end of the game. I might just close this and reopen it. I don't think I need to say anything else. After the morning of the second day, the so-called discovery of the crime. So yeah, so... Okay, so let me close the game. I'm going to reboot it because I just don't want to. But we're going to do one theory real quick here, okay? This is going to be like a huge mishmash. I'm going to have to edit this a bunch so that it is not unviewable. But there is, there's something to be said about how... So I was talking with Alan about this, and we were talking about Battler's true identity. How Battler, it seems to have been insinuated, is the kid that Natsui threw. Now, the only thing that's weird about that is we were saying, well, there's a stipulation that we still have to fit. So it's how can we make all of these given points fit? How can we make it fit that? How can we make it fit that? One, Battler is a grandchild of Kinzo's, right? That he was the orphaned kid that Kinzo presented to Natsuhi prior to giving birth to Jessica. Because that way he still fits into that definition of being, like, Natsui being his mom, kind of, not literally, but in the figurative sense that, like, should have been. Okay. Okay. Okay, so theory one is that Battler is a bastard child of Rudolph's. He was given to the Heritage House, I think that's what they called it, / Kinzo, because Rudolph wanted to hide his infidelity. Of note, this kid would have to be not Kiri's nor Asumu's. We would have known by now if our Battler was. Child was given to Natsuhi, who rejected it, and the kid somehow survives the fall and was then cared for by someone up until that child could subsume the real Battler's identity in in the 86, I can't type, Jesus, 86 conference. The question from that then becomes, like, why cover up from Rudolph? Why allow him to take Battler's identity? I think that theory 1 is much more convincing. The other theory would be theory 2. So this is my current thinking. Theory 1 is that Battler is a bastard child of Rudolph's. He was given to the heritage house / Kinzo because Rudolph wanted to hide his infidelity. Of note, this kid would have to not be Kiri's or Asumu's. We would have known by now if our Battler wasn't. The child was given to Natsui, who rejected it. The kid somehow survives the fall and been cared for by someone up until the child gets assumed the real Battler's identity in 86 conference. Real question from this: why cover up from Rudolph? Why allow him to take Battler's identity when the real Battler died? Also, how did the real Battler die? I didn't put a thing there. Theory 2: Rose is actually Battler's, I shouldn't say parent, mom. All of the above from like this point on is still true, but all the above still applies. Unlikely. Rose is the only one who has no strict denial for being the parent, despite potentially her age. Kraus plus Natsui make no sense. It doesn't really make sense with Ava either, given that she had George to skip Kraus and Natsui, so George was already alive at this point. Maybe it makes sense in some interpretation if Rosa had a kid very young and it was taken away since she was too young to care for it. Only thing this theory doesn't really answer is the birthdays that are listed, / who it was meant to be a message to in episode 3. To me, it feels more likely it's Rudolph, and that those are both the real Battler's birthdays. It could still be that this is still to send a message to Battler to like maybe try and wake him up about something. We know the current Battler thinks his birthday is July 15th. It might not actually be. Like, we don't know the real Battler's birthday. But I'm still very convinced that the two birthdays that were listed were our Battler's birthday and true Battler's birthday. But these are the two theories I have in such a way that these still work, and that it's not a literal sense that like Natsui is the mom, but the Natsui was going to be basically the stepmother to the kid. Okay, all that being said, we wasted a lot of time. There is other mysteries. I think we lack a little bit of info to solve them, and I am tired of content cucking, and I would actually like to continue reading. So we're going to copy paste this into here, delete this, don't save this, let me minimize this, reopen the game, and we will start episode 6. I'm going to go pee real quick. Hopefully we can take a good chunk out of episode 6 today. I'll be right back.